I know this is the case with many copywriters is they didn't go to copywriting school. They just figured it out. Is that your case? Like you just figured this thing out on your own?
So when people say copywriting, I think they often think of like a person at a typewriter or something like that, and it's only focused on words. I've never thought of copywriting like that. Let's take a step back of what copywriting is. Whenever I'm trying to copywrite, I'm not trying to type the best words or make the funniest joke or anything like that. What I'm trying to do is communicate a message from my brain to your brain, and preferably from my brain to a million brains, maybe a billion. And I'm going to use the best medium with the best tools I have at the time. So if we lived in the year 1700, for me to send a message to Chris, I write on a piece of paper and a guy on a horse like brings it over, and like crosses the country and sends it to you. And that's very inefficient, but that's all we had back then. So writing letters and writing words was the skill of the day. Fast forward to now. I mean, we've got phones, we've got videos, we've got audio, we've got all sorts of different things. Now we're on the precipice of like VR experiences. These are all different ways to instill information in people's heads. And so to think that only text is like the ultimate thing is insane to me. Yes, text is important. Yes, text is a lot of the foundation, but I also think making good images is very important. Like you do, making videos is important. And then the compression of information happens over time, right? It used to be to learn something, you watch a 2-hour documentary. Then we got YouTube videos that were 5 minutes long. And now you're kind of at the forefront of stuff like Instagram, where in 20 seconds, you teach me something. That used to be, you read a whole book to learn about a concept about sales that you're teaching. And now you're doing it in 20 seconds. We're compressing information as humans even more and more. And so I want to know, what's the best way to communicate information? Is it words? Is it images? Is it videos? Is it all of the above? And I'll do that. That's what I think copywriting is.
Do you draw a distinction between what you do and how you help companies and say people in advertising who are copywriters and working on big campaigns?
This all gets into the semantics of like a creative versus like who can make the funniest commercial for a company for like the Super Bowl versus a copywriter. What I'm usually doing is the more boring stuff. And I don't think it's boring, but it's like, okay, you have a piece of software that sells an SEO software, research software, and you have a page and 1,000 people come to it. I look at the page with fresh eyes and I say, you know what, that headline doesn't really make any sense. What if we change it to that? And then I say, this image doesn't convey any information. What if we make it a GIF showing someone typing in how to write on your computer, and it shows the results and it highlights, write this article. And you're like, oh, I understand what your software does now. I go through and just try to optimize it like that. That's it. It's not even that hard. I bet a normal person, if you show them a web page and say, how could I make this better? A lot of people could probably do what I do.
This is good because my background is I studied graphic design, and then my first job out of school was to work at an ad agency. So when I think of copywriting, I think of the art and craft of what they do. There's a ton of copywriters. There are fewer advertising copywriters because it's a whole different art form. It's them spending a lot of time to craft a few words for a very few number of clients. What you're talking about is I get results for my clients, bottom line, through words and images and layout and things like that, right?
So I'm assuming you worked in like a big agency?
It was a medium-sized agency. Mm-hmm.
Medium-sized agent. Put yourself in like a really, really big advertising agency. Let's say you're in New York working in a big advertising agency, Chicago, somewhere like that. And think about what the actual incentive is for the person making that ad. What they're trying to do is win like a little award. Oftentimes. So David Ogilvy talks about this a lot. This is where I kind of learned it from, and then I experienced it on my own. I didn't think it was real. And then I worked for some mid-sized to large companies and realized it was real. Look where the incentives lay. For me, my incentive lays in I improved this person's ad campaign by X amount, and they're like, wow, this guy made us a lot of money. We paid him $10,000, but he made us $100,000. 10x their ROI, right? That's my incentive. If you are employee number 1,200 at a company of 5,000, perhaps you have a manager above you, and they have a manager, and they have a manager. So your incentive is every Friday when you go in for that week report is to have a chart that goes up and to the right that shows I did good work or I won an award for this ad. Not that it made the client sales. So oftentimes there's this disconnect with those types of things. And so whenever we're talking about direct response copywriting, it means you come in and have to make more money for that company. That's where my incentives lay. Whereas sometimes for some of those big ad companies like a Ford commercial, they're just like, we want to get a best cinematography award and take the most awesome drone shots of these horses running with the Ford F-150. That's kind of their incentive, not that commercial is actually generating any sales. So that's the difference between direct response copywriting and kind of creative advertising generally.
So there's some clarity here that for our audience who's listening, because my friends mostly are in the advertising space. They often say advertising doesn't reflect culture, it shapes culture. So they're thinking on a whole different space. It's not necessarily tied to results and metrics and things that you can measure.